So, today we are going to talk about something that Stephanie and I have talked about quite a bit off the podcast. And we've touched on it in a couple episodes, but today we're talking about toxic shit in our food and water. And I saw this article in American Military News, and it was from last Thursday. And it was RFK Jr. warning about how Americans are being mass poisoned by processed foods and chemicals. And he believes there's a chronic disease epidemic in the United States. And frankly, I 100% agree with that. And this is not the first time that he's been outspoken about this issue. So I want to play a quick clip from an interview that he did with Joe Rogan last July.
In 93, somebody figured out a way that there was certain bacteria that glyphosate would not kill. And they said we could take a gene out of that bacteria and put it into a corn seed and develop a corn that cannot be killed by glyphosate. So they developed Roundup Ready corn. And that corn, you can pour glyphosate all over it and it will do nothing to it. So now you could fire all of those workers who were expensive, and you hire one airplane and they fly over the fields. They saturate the entire landscape with glyphosate. Everything dies except the Roundup Ready corn. And within a couple of years, Roundup Ready corn was now 90% of the corn, 95% of the corn in the United States is now Roundup Ready corn.
So when they started doing this, there's a direct result? Like you can see the increase in celiac disease. You can see, is this like documented?
No, that's not documented. But there's a whole range of diseases that are now, the different levels of science have linked to glyphosate exposure. When we sued Monsanto, the judge needs to make a threshold decision about whether there's sufficient science to show a jury, and that is a very high threshold. So, of all of the diseases that are probably almost certainly caused by glyphosate, the only one to pass that threshold was the case that we brought for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So at that point, we had enough rat studies, enough human studies. We had about 10 of each. And we were able to go to the judge and say, we got enough science on this now to show that it's that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is being caused by glyphosate. If you like this video.
Okay, so you remember that whole Monsanto case, right, Stephanie?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was like a big deal. But that's not the only thing going on, right? Last week, there was an article in the New York Post, and it was highlighting a new study that was done by the Environmental Working Group. And this was in the Journal of Exposure Science and Environmental Epidemiology. And it said that 4 out of 5 Americans, which is 80% of Americans, are being exposed to a harmful pesticide called chlorquamaquat. And chlormequat is linked to reduced fertility, altered fetal growth, and delayed puberty. And this is a chemical that the federal government allows to be used on oats and other grains that are imported into the United States. And the whole reason for it is that it alters plant growth and it keeps the plant from bending over, which makes it easier to harvest. And this chemical was found in 92% of oat-based foods, including Quaker Oats and Cheerios. So the study data goes back to 2017, and it was discovered that between 2017 to May of 2023, higher and higher levels of chlormequat were being observed. In 2017, they found the chemical in 69% of participants. And then between 2018 to 2022, that rose to 74%. But then in 2023, it spiked to 90%. And there's been limited study on human beings exposed to this chemical. But in animal studies, chlormequat has damaged reproductive systems and disrupted fetal growth. And it's changed the development of head and bones and altered key metabolic processes. And these studies weren't just done on Quaker Oats and Cheerios. The EWG tested 20 other oat-based food products, including 7 organic, 13 non-organic, and 9 wheat-based products. And all of them had high levels of this chemical, with the exception of 2 samples of bread and like 1 of the 7 organic samples. So clearly, this is an issue with both organic and non-organic foods. And on top of that, even with this knowledge, the Biden administration allowed the first ever use of this chemical, chlormequat, on barley, oat, triticale, and wheat grown in the United States as of April of last year. And that's probably why there was such a big spike in 2023. And so, Stephanie, I have several troubling stories that I want to bring up in this episode. But first, I have to ask you, like, do your kids eat Cheerios and Quaker Oats? Because I was literally eating Quaker Oats several times a week before we moved overseas, and it was like a staple of my breakfast diet. And God knows how much of this fucking chemical is in my system.
Yeah. In fact, we have Cheerios in my pantry right now. I was actually just telling my husband, because I love cereal. Like that's my thing, my evening snack. I'd rather have
Yep.
cereal than like ice cream. But I'm like, now that it's like $9 for a box of cereal, I'm not buying it anymore. So it's actually, probably helping out my health, the fact that there's inflation right now. But yeah, we do have Cheerios. And I feel like anything that comes in a box these days is poison. And you said how it can damage reproductive systems. And I'm just thinking, how many countries have we talked about over the time we've had this podcast where their fertility rates are like alarmingly low? And then you brought up the oats, and like what has been the super popular thing that all the young trendy people are getting? Oat milk in your lattes, oat milk in your smoothies. And I am one of these people. Like I started drinking oat milk because it was advertised like it's healthy and it tastes great and everything. I am telling you, like, I gained so much weight, and finally I heard on some podcasts, they were like, stop drinking oat milk. It's so bad for you in like every way. And I cut that out, and I swear it's like helping me get back to my normal weight. Just that one thing. So I got to throw that in there too. And it's probably because it's loaded with these chemicals. But I want to switch gears just for a second on something I'm super passionate about, because it turns out that we've also been poisoned by our drinking water. And so in 2019, there was a study that showed that the fluoride in our drinking water is a neurotoxin and especially dangerous to children. And this study is published in PubMed on the NIH.gov website if anyone wants to go look at it. But it concludes that, quote, the recent epidemiological results support the notion that elevated fluoride intake during early development can result in IQ deficits that may be considerable. Like it's just crazy. And this study took information that was published all the way back in 2012 and came to this conclusion. So my question is, why didn't they do something back in 2012?
Right.
So I went and I looked up on the same website, the studies in 2012. And one talks about how adding fluoride to drinking water to prevent cavities was the original goal. Well, it turns out it doesn't even prevent cavities. And by drinking it, it actually causes systemic adverse effects impacting things like memory. So again, if they knew all of this back in 2012, and there were published studies confirming this in 2019, then why in 2024 do we still have fluoride in our drinking water? Well, it turns out that this report was part of a 6-year national toxicology program studying the neurotoxicity of fluoride. And it concluded in 2023. But guess what? The Biden administration blocked it from being released to the public, and they ended up being sued. And the only reason it's released now to the public is because they were sued for that information. So they were trying to hide it. And according to an article by Cision, quote, 52 of 55 studies found lower IQ with higher fluoride exposures, demonstrating remarkable consistency. Of the 19 studies rated higher quality, 18 found lowering of IQ. The meta-analysis could not detect any safe exposure, including at levels common from drinking artificially fluoridated water. Documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act show government agencies that promote fluoridation, allied with dental interests, have tried to water down the report, end quote. So this is going to be really scary to hear, but Tara, do you want to know where the fluoride in our drinking water actually comes from?
I don't know. Do I?
No, but I'm going to tell you anyways. So there is actually an organization. You can go to fluoridealert.org. And they talk about this on there, but silicofluorides are not the same thing as the pharmaceutical grade fluoride products that you would find in like your toothpaste. They're actually unprocessed industrial byproducts of the phosphate fertilizer industry. So instead of the fertilizer industry paying to dispose of their toxic byproducts, they're selling it back to our government to be put into our drinking water. Like literally, they are literally poisoning us and have been lying about it for decades and now trying to hide the evidence and the studies that are coming out. And they've been saying, oh, well, it's good for your teeth when it's really destroying our brains. So where does this leave us? Well, the EPA is now being sued, and they're the group that's suing them is trying to remove fluoride from the drinking water. And I'm sure this is going to drag out. So who knows when that's going to happen. But I will say the evidence is abundant. So I don't know how they will be allowed to continue to poison us. But then again, Tara, do you really think anything's going to happen? Or is this going to be just another instance where they just get away with it and nothing's done and there's no accountability?
Well, this is the same EPA that approved the chlormequat, and God knows how many other chemicals are being sprayed on our food. So I'm sure they will get away with it. And it's like, you can't even drink bottled water now. Like, right? That's not safe either. I didn't make notes
Yeah.
on this, but a couple weeks ago, an article came out, multiple articles, and even CNN was covering it. And they were saying that there was a new study where researchers discovered that bottled water contains like 10 to 100 times more bits of plastic than previously estimated. And they're like nanoparticles of plastic. So you'd think you're being safer by drinking bottled water instead of tap water. So you're either ingesting plastic toxic chemicals or you're ingesting fluoride or metals or whatever else it happens to be, right?
Yeah. It's
And
crazy.
there's yet another ongoing EPA controversy around another chemical called paraquat. And this is a toxic herbicide that was deemed safe for use on American crops, even though scientific evidence has shown that it's linked to Parkinson's disease. There were dozens of peer review studies, hundreds of research papers, and there are currently ongoing lawsuits against the EPA because they've ignored all the evidence and they actually reapproved the chemical to be used. And this chemical is also linked to respiratory damage and kidney disease. And I was reading an article in The Guardian that said ingesting just a single teaspoon is considered deadly. But somehow it's perfectly acceptable to spray on grapes and almonds and soybeans on farmland all throughout the United States, even though the FDA requires farmers using it to wear fucking protective gear and be certified. But then we eat the food. Like, how is that safe?
It's not. It's
Yeah.
not. And I mean, I think we know now, like literally anything they say is safe. I'm just going to assume it's like deadly because they
Yeah.
lie about everything.
Yeah. And the US News and World Report came out with an article last Monday talking about how pregnant women should avoid packaged pastries and takeout food. And I know we talked about chemicals in fast food packaging and wrappers last year in one of our episodes, and how chemicals like phthalates from plastic can shed from the food packaging onto the food. But there was a new study published in the Environment International Journal that has discovered that these phthalates consumed during pregnancy can harm the fetus. And apparently, there was already research done linking exposure to phthalates during pregnancy to a higher risk of preterm birth, low birth weight, autism, and ADHD. But now this new study shows that it can also cause inflammation and oxidative stress in the fetus. And this was not limited to fast food packaging. They studied ultra processed foods like packaged cake mixes, French fries, soft drinks, a whole bunch of other shit. So basically, anything with packaging.
Well, that's the thing though, because it's not just things with packaging, because it's like even with fruits and vegetables and stuff, you have to like fully do research and you have to buy, organic, non-GMO produce. But then again, just because it's in the label that it's organic or non-GMO, doesn't necessarily mean that it's truly organic or non-GMO. So it's like, I
Right.
feel like we just can't win. And like they're determined to keep us fat and sick because, I mean, they make so much money off of it.
Yeah. And like if that's not enough, like if you are pregnant and now you have to worry about your food packaging, apparently when your kid's born, you have to worry about toxic metals in their baby food because once again, the FDA is in the spotlight and under pressure by a coalition of attorney generals from various states who are calling on the FDA to take action to protect children from lead and other toxic metals that they're finding in baby food. There's 20 states involved in this. Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin. Attorney generals from these states all got together. They issued petitions to the FDA. This was back in October of 2021. It was ignored. They did another one in June of 2022. Again, not addressed, despite the fact that the CDC reported nearly 400 confirmed cases of lead poisoning linked to specific baby foods. It was Wanna like Wanna Banana, I guess, Wanna Banana, Schnucks, and Weiss brand, and these were like cinnamon applesauce pouches. And according to an article I read in CBS Detroit, the only required action level test for metal in baby food is for arsenic in baby rice cereal. And currently, manufacturers they get to choose whether or not they test their baby products for metals. Like that's fucking insane. And back in April of 2021, the FDA had set dates for reaching like action level testing in baby foods, but then they mysteriously removed the information from their website. Like, why wouldn't they want this testing to be done?
And really, we're going to let the manufacturers choose. I mean, obviously, they're going to choose not to test it. Like, how ridiculous. And I mean, baby food is just one of the many things targeting children that's just pure poison. So I was looking at just some of the things that are banned in Europe and Australia that we have in the US. So food dyes, that's like at the top of the list. So like red 49, red 4, yellow 5 and 6, they're linked to things like cancer, ADHD, and autism, and are banned basically everywhere but the US. And what do we do here? We put them in every single food that's targeted towards children.
Yep.
And then you have other kids' foods like Twinkies, Ritz crackers, Skittles, Mountain Dew, Fruit Loops, and milk that comes from cows that are given growth hormones that are also banned in pretty much every other country. And something else interesting, did you know that Putin banned all GMO foods in Russia?
Mm-mm.
They can't sell them, and it's like a big fine and violation if they do. Sure would be nice if anyone in our government cared about us that much to ban those things, but they don't. And another thing banned, and you talked a little bit about this with RFK, is US corn. They can't sell it in other countries. So just like the oats that you were talking about, it's toxic. I think you said the glyphosate or whatever it's called, glycophosphate. But it's not just the corn. And this is where it's like you have to really do your due diligence and research because it's everything made with the corn, like high fructose corn syrup. And by the way, that's another thing that you won't find in other countries. Yet here in the US, it's in everything. I mean, everything. So just about any sweet tasting food has it. Why do they have it? Because it's cheaper than sugar. So they use high fructose corn syrup, and especially the food targeted towards children, once again, because they know that it's addicting. And so the more they put it in it, the more people are going to crave it and the more money they make. And I would be here all day long if I listed all the banned foods. So you get the point, but those are like the big ones that just piss me off. If you can't tell from my voice, I get a little heated when it comes to my kids getting poisoned.
Well, I want to mention a couple more because they're things I used to consume regularly, like Coffee Mate Creamer and Gatorade. Those are both banned in Europe.
Coffee Mate really surprised me.
Mhm.
Like, I
Yeah.
mean, who doesn't drink Coffee Mate? I mean, it's such a staple here.
Exactly. And it comes in all those different flavors.
Mhm.
They have like special holiday flavors, and then you think you're being healthy because you're consuming this creamer that has less calories, and you think you're being healthy drinking Gatorade because it has electrolytes, and it's nothing but complete shit. And then another thing banned here is Little Debbie snacks. And I don't eat those. I think they're gross, but my husband used to suck those things down like every day. And it's like, I did enjoy a lot of other stuff though that's banned here, like Sara Lee and Entenmann's pastries. You can't get that shit here. But my point with all this is like the reason the FDA allows so many toxic additives is because, like I mentioned earlier, with the toxic metals in baby food, they have this category called GRAS, GRAS, and it means generally recognized as safe. And this category is what allows companies to put unknown additives in American food products, even though we don't know the health risks of what they are. And I'm going to mention a few of these things. Titanium oxide is a whitening agent that gets put in candy, like the candy you mentioned before, like Skittles, Starburst, Sour Patch Kids, Jello. And this shit is categorized by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a group 2B carcinogen, and it has a potential risk to humans if you inhale it. What do you do every time you open a box of Jello powder? Like you're inhaling the powder, the sugar shit on the Skittles. You're inhaling that shit. And then there's azitocarbonamide. I hope I said that correctly.
Good job.
Thank you. I'm trying. We put that in our flour as a bleaching agent, but when it decomposes, it generates urethane, which again, another potential carcinogen. We have propylparaben, another GRAS approved classification that's been prohibited in Europe since the early 2000s because it has negative effects on fertility, endocrine system function, and reproduction health. Still approved in the US. And then you mentioned the milk that comes from cows giving growth hormones. Well, like these RBST and RBGH growth hormones have been banned in Europe since the fucking 1990s because of their connection with prostate, breast, and colorectal cancers. And like you said, the list goes on, but I'm pointing these out for a reason that I want to share towards the end of the podcast.
Okay, I gotta say something because I can't stop thinking about it. You mentioned Little Debbie, and my daughter like loves Little Debbie's, but she calls them Big Deborah's. So I just wanted to share that with everyone because like it's freaking hilarious. But okay, sorry, let's get serious again.
No, it's good. But okay, let's talk about another disturbing story, right? So the Daily Caller reported on Saturday that a recently released federal grant listing shows that the USDA has been funding research into trash-fed crickets as an alternative protein source. And I am emphasizing the term trash-fed here, okay?
Ugh.
Specifically, this $130,000 grant will support research into using municipal landfill waste to feed crickets that will later be harvested for human consumption. And according to the article, the USDA awarded the grant to Mighty Cricket Inc., which is a private firm that sells cricket flour, cricket protein powder, and cricket oatmeal. And the agency believes that using landfill waste to feed crickets is going to help the firm procure cricket feed at a lower cost than what's available on the market, leading to savings that can be passed on to the consumer. Stephanie, I don't know about you, but I have zero fucking interest in consumer savings on cricket powder made from crickets that are fed on fucking landfill waste or anything else for that matter. How about you?
No, I mean that's disgusting. Like, what is their obsession with feeding us bugs? Like,
Right.
it's just absurd, and they're so like parasitic. And I'm sorry, but like I am just so sick and tired of hearing about these idiotic things that our tax dollars are paying for while
Yep.
most Americans are struggling. We're sending our money to the government and this is what they're using it for. Like, doesn't it just make your blood boil? It pisses me off.
Oh, I know. It's absolutely fucking disturbing. But we cannot let a food related episode go by without talking about Bill Gates because
Satan.
yes, as we know, he is one of the biggest players in the fuck with our natural food supply in his mission to get rid of farming and farm animals. So there was an article that came out in The Guardian on Saturday reporting that Bill Gates has recently announced he's investing in a company that's creating lab made animal fat. Why? because he loves burgers, but plant-based alternatives don't have the greasy, oily sizzle of animal fats. So he recently took to his website. You can go on there and read all this. And he like lamented about his love of burgers. And he said, quote, the secret ingredient is animal fat. It's what gives so many foods their richness, juiciness, meltability, unique mouthfeel, and overall flavor. Unfortunately, it's also a disaster for the climate, end quote. So Gates has invested in a company called Savor that has developed a way to make the same carbon and hydrogen chains that are found in actual animal fats in a process that creates supposedly real fat molecules that taste exactly like animal derived fats, but without releasing greenhouse gases into the air or using farmland and also saving water. And I guess they've managed to do this by taking carbon dioxide from the air and hydrogen from water and then heating them up together, oxidizing them to trigger the separation of fatty acids and then form fat. And the article quotes Bill Gates as saying, quote, I've tasted Savor's products and I couldn't believe I wasn't eating real butter. The burger came close to, end quote. Again, Stephanie, why don't we just eat real fucking natural animal fat from animals the way God intended, as human beings have been doing for thousands of years?
Yeah. Well, a couple things come to mind. Like, first of all, the amount of money that's gone into creating this fake animal fat, like, probably could have fed like all the hungry people in the world. Like, they probably could have like taught them how to, start their own farms and shit like that. The other thing you say about how like humans have been doing this for thousands of years, and like, remember back in our like human biology classes in school, and they would teach us about evolution and how long it would take for like one tiny mutation or genetic change to take form, like thousands, I don't even, maybe 100,000 years. I don't know, but it was a long time. And then you think about like how many things have been introduced to our diet just since the 50s that human beings have never been exposed to before. Like, there's no, how is our body even processing this? And so you think about all the disease we have. Well, maybe there's a root cause. Maybe it's all this shit that we're talking about.
Right. There wasn't a rampant ADHD in the 50s. Like,
Right.
you didn't have all these autistic kids in the 50s.
Yep. Yeah. And so, speaking of the 50s, back then they did the same thing about like the animal fat, where all of a sudden fat was like dangerous and it's causing heart attacks and we have to remove the fat from everything. And so that's exactly what they did. But when they removed the fat from everything, it tasted like shit. So what do? They replaced it with things like seed oils and sugar and artificial flavors. And what was the result? An increase in heart disease, but also obesity and diabetes and every other thing you can possibly imagine. Like, we are sicker than ever. We spend more money than ever on healthcare. We have more resources than ever, but we're sicker. And it's like, has this caused our government to change their nutrition guidelines? No, no, not at all. In fact, who pays for those guidelines and studies? The food and beverage industry. And if we aren't all obese and sick, that would really hurt the billion-dollar healthcare and pharmaceutical industries. So I've completely given up on waiting for the government and corporations to do the right thing, because they're not. It's just not going to happen. And they could fix one thing and then they'll do 10 more things. So the bottom line is we can't trust it anymore. And that's why it's more important now than ever to educate yourself and use common sense, because they're definitely not going to tell us what's the best thing. And speaking of Bill Gates, he also invested in a company called Appeal. And this Appeal is this senseless thing. It's tasteless, it's odorless. You can't see it, but it's a coating that goes on fruits and vegetables, and it makes them last longer. So companies like Kroger and Costco are already using this so that way their produce section looks fresh and they can keep it out there longer. Well, the coating can't be scrubbed or washed off, and the company says it's safe to consume. But do you believe that for 1 second? Because I
Nope.
sure as hell don't. And here's the kicker. The label is organic. So just like I said earlier, you can't trust that. How can they say it's organic when it's literally coated in like a lab grown substance? Well, because one like ingredient of that is organic. So just because one ingredient of all the ingredients to make up that coating is organic, they can label it as organic produce. So that is again why you can't even trust the labels at this point. It's just absolute insanity.
Yeah, it is. And this brings me to like the point that I wanted to make earlier, which is I have noticed a major difference between the food in Europe versus the food in America. And it's not just a ban on artificial dyes and colors in Europe. There is a ban on BHA and BHT preservatives. And like we talked about, there's a ton of foods that are banned here that you can get in the United States. And I'll be honest, at first I was really bothered by this. And like I was almost in a panic because I was used to using very specific MCT coffee creamer and almond butter and protein powder and all these products, all this shit that they don't sell here. And I was honestly like stressing out on the idea of not having my favorite foods. But I quickly found out like the food here is way better. Like the produce that you were just talking about, it's different. It's fresh. It goes bad within a few days if you don't eat it. It can't sit on your counter for a week to 2 weeks, right? Same with packaged foods like cheese and yogurt and cottage cheese. Like the expiration date is maximum 2 weeks, maximum, not like the 2 to 3 months expiration on a lot of the dairy products that I used to buy in the States. And I used to buy them specifically because I knew I could keep them. Oh, this
Mhm.
sour cream will last for 3 months. Awesome. Right?
Yep.
Not here. Not here. Why? Probably because it's not covered in preservative chemicals. And I've also noticed most products here are sold in paper packages instead of plastic, like spices, even stuff like baking soda. Um, it all comes in little paper pouches, and even like bread mixes, everything is little paper pouches. And do they have packaged sliced bread? Yep, they do. But most people buy fresh bread every day instead. There are like little bakery shops and kiosks in every neighborhood. They sell fresh baked bread and pastries every morning. And it's like whatever they've made, that's it. And when it's gone, that's the end of it for the day. And they start again fresh the next morning. And these breads and pastries are fucking amazingly delicious, but they're not overly sweet. And it's like been such a strange experience for me. I love sweets. I mean, that's my biggest downfall, sweets and carbs. And there's so many amazing desserts here. And I order something and it looks like it's going to be decadent and heavy, but it's not. Like it's always light and refreshing and it's never super sweet. And people eat this shit like every single day. You walk down the street and you see little children, like 2 to 5 year old kids with a bread roll in their hand, and they're just like happily, walking with their mom eating bread as they walk down the street. But guess what? None of these people are fat. Like I hardly see any fat people here. And now, granted, people here smoke like chimneys. So I'm not going to say, oh, they're so much healthier than Americans. But I actually think that they're healthier than Americans. And
Oh,
like,
probably. Can you
yeah,
get your candy corn there? Don't you have
no,
any
they're
candy corn?
yeah, there's no candy corn here. There's I not that I found anyway. There might be like a specialty store, but even I don't even see a lot of candy sold here to be honest. There's it's very like bread and pastry oriented. But like I said, people aren't fat here. And here's what was astonishing for me. I realized within a few weeks of being here that I felt good. Like I never feel bloated or sick after I eat. Even when I have a big meal, I don't have that like, oh my God, I need to unbutton my jeans feeling. And I have indulged in some pretty big meals here where I was expecting to feel that way afterwards, but it hasn't happened once. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a food expert, but I am a certified nutrition specialist. I've done every fucking diet and food plan known to man because I was a fat kid who always had a weight problem. And I think I'm pretty well versed in nutrition and I consider myself to be a fairly healthy eater. And yet I am eating stuff here like these delicious breads and pastries. I'm having cappuccinos every day that are just straight cappuccinos that don't have, you know, uh, creamer
Bunch of crap in
flavors,
them.
yeah, added to them. And I literally feel better than I ever have. Like, is that crazy?
Yeah, no, I believe it. I believe it because you don't have all the chemicals and all this shit is probably the real thing that's
Mhm.
causing all the problems and the obesity and the diabetes and everything else.
Yeah, and Stephanie, you know that I have been prone to these debilitating headaches for like the past 15 years. And I didn't even get them properly diagnosed until last year because nobody could tell me what they were. And people kept saying, oh, it's got to be, allergies or the weather. And I call bullshit on that because I had them in California. I had them when I lived in Washington. I had them in Texas. All those states have totally different weather. And to be honest, the weather where I'm living right now is like a mirror of Western Washington, and it's cold and overcast and rainy all the time, and I haven't had a single debilitating headache since leaving the United States 5 months ago. Is that a
Wow.
coincidence?
No
Right?
way.
Right, exactly. I mean, I used to get these headaches at least once a month, at most once every 2 months. They would last for weeks. They would be accompanied by all sorts of strange symptoms, earaches and tingling in my head, and it would hurt to touch my hair. And no, they were not migraines. And like I said, this has been going on for at least 15 years, but I haven't had a single episode in 5 months. And I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but these realizations have literally opened my eyes to stuff that I didn't pay attention to before. And it's just crazy that as Americans, we don't see how damaging the shit is that's in our food until you're taken out of that environment and somewhere else for a length of time where you notice the difference. And
Yeah.
that is what I'm noticing right now.
Yeah, my husband gets those headaches too, and he noticed that anything with these like heavy preservatives will trigger the headaches, which is
Yeah.
crazy because of course we thought it was the weather too and like things like that, but no, it was the preservatives. And I got to ask, okay, so first question, people walk a lot more there, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's
people walk
another thing.
everywhere.
We
Mhm.
we take our car to go 2 blocks here rather than walking and getting fresh air and getting some exercise, you
Yeah, I
know?
think I don't think I mentioned this on a podcast, but I'm pretty sure I told you. Like, it'd be in the middle of a blizzard. Like, it's a snowstorm, not a blizzard, but like a snowstorm. And you'd see moms out pushing baby strollers, and like the kids are all bundled up in these little sleeping bag things. But
Mhm.
like, it doesn't stop people from just going out on a walk.
Yeah.
They people walk everywhere. Yes, they take the bus and all that, but you can go out on any given day, and most people are on foot or they're riding bikes. People here ride, they rollerblade. They have these like ski things where it's like skis that you can use on the road,
Oh my
and
gosh.
people yeah, it's actually kinda cool, but people here are super active, and
Mhm.
yes, the smoking is like a big thing, but like I said, I don't see fat people here, and you
Yeah.
have people that are a lot of elderly people here, they're walking everywhere, and I'm
Mhm.
sure that is, remnant of the communist culture when you didn't have access to a lot of things, but young people, old people, like, it doesn't matter, everyone here is active.
Yeah. And then my other question is like, do you feel like your focus and like your mindset and your brain and everything's working better? Because, and the reason I ask that is because doing research for this episode, I noticed a common theme that whether it's the fluoride or the preservatives or anything, it's basically leading to memory loss, lack of focus, lack of concentration. And so my conspiracy brain is like, are they trying to basically make us like zombies that don't question anything? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I guarantee you they are. I have to say yes, but I don't know if that's a result of the fact that I'm not like stressed out in a job, like I was
Yeah.
before. So maybe that's why, but I feel better all the way around. I feel healthier. I feel more alert. Like it's just it's totally crazy, but I just feel overall healthier. And yet, like I said, I'm eating more stuff that I would have considered, like, bad, like the
Right.
breads and pastries and that I wasn't eating before, and I just don't feel shitty eating stuff here.
Well, and that's why I feel like it's so important to do episodes like this because at the end of the day, the thing that we can do that actually could make a difference is voting with our dollars. And if we quit buying the shit like that has all these different chemicals, and we start going for more natural, non-GMO things, shopping at local bakeries if you can even find one anymore, and things like that, maybe possibly we could start shifting things here, because companies are only going to keep doing this when they're profiting from it. But if enough people wake up, like look at how much has changed going to the grocery store now versus when we were kids, like they really are trying to put more healthier options and organic. So hopefully we can get back to just a normal point. But man, it's like we've got to do something. We're sicker than ever. Disease rates keep getting worse. And we're spending more money than we ever have on healthcare. So it should be the opposite. So hopefully, we start seeing some things changing. And I'm so grateful for people like RFK that have the balls to not only bring it to the public's attention, but to go and sue these companies and the government for this type of information. So I'm going to be tracking that EPA lawsuit because I am on it with this.
I'm like, which
fluoridated
one?
water.
Because there's like four
There's
of them
so
right
many.
now.
I'm going to freaking track them all. We're going to let everyone know what happens. But in the meantime, start paying attention to what you're buying and quit buying the crap that is loaded so that they quit manufacturing it. Maybe they need a wake-up call. So sorry for an alarming episode, but hopefully it was very informative and educational, because you know what? The government might be lying to us, but we can help each other out and learn the truth about this stuff and do better. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Have a great week, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday.